But I don't. But it doesn't get us to
Ladies and gentlemen, this is a perfect time to make sure all cell phones are turned off for the service.
Esai Nael Heharim, me ayin yavo Ezri. Ezri me'im Adonai oseh shamayim va'aretz. Al yatein lamot raglecha al yanum shomrecha. Hine lo yanum velo yishan shomer Yisrael Adonai shomrecha. Adonai tzilcha al yad yeminecha. Yomam hashemesh lo yakeka. V'yareach b'layla, Adonai yishmorecha mikol ra. Yishmor et nafshecha, Adonai yishmor tzeit chavoecha me'atav yad olam. From the 121st Psalm. I will lift up mine eyes unto the mountains. What is the source of my help? My help comes from the Lord, maker of heaven and earth. God will not let your foot give way. Your protector will not slumber. Behold, the guardian of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. God is your guardian. God is your protection at your right hand. The sun will not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your soul. The Lord will guard your going out and your coming in, from this time forth and forevermore. Eloheinu v'Elohei Avotenu, our God and God of all generations. Thou who governest all things with infinite wisdom and mercy, and who guidest the destinies of all of humankind. As a parent have you loved us and showered your blessings upon us. Therefore we shall not murmur even when sorrow befalls us. But with humility and unfaltering trust, we shall accept your decrees. In joy and in sorrow alike, we praise your goodness and acknowledge your justice. We remember that we are but strangers upon earth. Like a shadow, our life flees away. Help us, O God, so to walk in your sight, that when the few years of our earthly pilgrimage are ended, we may be ready to meet our end with tranquil mind. To thee we look for comfort and strength. When one of our beloved is taken from us and a link is broken in the chain of love which binds us together. Though we walk in the valley of the shadow of death, we shall fear no evil, for you are with us. Be praised, O eternal our God, in all your dispensations, and sanctified be your name, now and forevermore. Let us all say together, Amen. There are a number of members of the family who do want to share some thoughts with us today. And first, I want to call upon Julian's brother, David Albert, to share.
You know, this is kind of like when I had a bar mitzvah. I'm so small, long time ago, but I needed to stand on a little platform because I was so short that I was like down here. So, and I had a pretty good voice and I needed to sing all that stuff. So I needed my little platform. So here I am, I'm back on a platform. Anyway, anyone that doesn't know this, I'm 14 years younger than Julian. Julian was really a special guy in my life because he kind of acted as a brother / father while I was growing up. He did lots of things to help me grow up. And one of the things that made me become an orthodontist is my brother Julian. He's just a very humorous, special person in my life, and he'll always be. And so I was at his grocery store. As you probably all know, Julian was in the grocery business, the laundromat business, and he was a jack of all trades kind of guy. He was a very intelligent man, and he could learn anything very quickly. He never looked at directions. He just looked at the project and did it. And so Julian had me at the grocery store, one of these little grocery stores, and he had a push broom, and I was about 12 or 13, and he said to me, why don't you clean the store floor? And the store floor was one of these old wooden floors that went up and down. It was an old building, and I really cleaned that floor that I thought was just perfect. And Julian looked at it and he said, you know, you are so bad at this. You can't do this kind of thing. You need to figure something else out. Now, let me show you what I mean. He picked up that push broom. He did the whole store all over, and he had a whole pot full of dirt. And he said, you see what I mean? You can't do this. You need to figure out something else. And he said, unless you want to work for me for the rest of your life. And I said, no, I don't think so. I think I'll work on something else. And so that's the kind of thing that he did. He had serious motive, but he could do it in an incredibly humorous, comforting way. And that's how he always was. He really loved his family. And today we are really commensurating his love of family. And when he married his second wife, he told me one of the greatest things of that marriage for him was raising young children. He wanted to do that. It was like a mission for him. He loved children, and he wanted to have a fatherly role that he felt like he needed to really perform. And I think his children will exemplify his love of them and that sort of thing. He really wanted to do things for his family. He was totally in a family. He's very much like his mother, my mother. They live their life in a different way than most of us live our lives. They live their life through their family. They didn't do all that much for themselves. As you all know, Julian could have purchased any material thing that he wanted, but he never cared about stuff like that. But boy, he wanted his children to have the best education. They had to be educated. That was a very paramount thing in his life. He wanted to be sure that they were part of the real world of education that they could provide for themselves, family, et cetera, et cetera. So Julian always did whatever he could for his family. And he always did it with humor. I can't stress Julian's humor enough. The man was just funny. Even with serious issues, he was just funny. The first house that we ever built, we ran out of money. The builder couldn't finish the house. We needed to finish it up. And then it was a big site with just a bunch of dirt. And we didn't have enough money to landscape that property. And we had a landscape design, but we didn't have the funds to do the landscape. So Julian said to me, he looked at this plan and he said, you know, I got an idea. Let's rent a two-man auger. And I said, a two-man auger, what is that? And he explained it to me. And he said, well, here's what we'll do. We will dig every single hole on this plant with this auger. And then when we've got all the holes dug each month, what you'll do is you'll buy whatever plants you can buy. We'll plop them in the appropriate holes and we'll water them in. And eventually the place will get landscaped. That's what we did. It worked out just fine. And that's how he did things. Other things that are so interesting about Julian is one time I came over to one of his courts. It was his Jasmine court. It was off of East Colfax and Jasmine. And he was just sitting there smoking a cigar. Well, I'm going to take that back. Puffing on the cigar. He didn't smoke it. He puffed on it. And he had a painter by the name of Woods that had painted for him for 102 years. And they were just sitting there in two beat up old chairs in the driveway, admiring Woods' paint job. And that's what they did for the whole afternoon. They just stayed there admiring Woods' paint job of this property that he owned. One of the things that I really bugged Julian about is he was a workaholic. He was a guy from a different planet in terms of work. He was like a 7-day-a-week person. He worked 7 days a week, rain or shine, no matter what. He would be with us today if his knees weren't bad, because his knees led to a lot of his downfall because he couldn't get in his truck anymore. He couldn't crawl around. He couldn't do this. He couldn't do that. And Julian truly enjoyed doing what he did. And when his knees messed up, he would not get knee replacements because he doesn't like doctoring. And so he just wouldn't do it. And eventually he just couldn't do what he did. And he finally had to give up. If he wouldn't have given up, I wouldn't be here talking right now. He'd still be getting in his truck, going to his laundromat, going to wherever, and he'd keep rolling. But he loved traveling, but he didn't travel. It's kind of an oxymoron. That's how he was. And so finally, towards the latter years of his life, 70, 80, whatever, he's 94 when he passed away. It really bothered me that he talked about traveling, but really didn't walk the walk. He talked the talk, but he didn't walk the walk because he had to put a hot water heater. He needed to do this or that. But he always talked about Alaska. So I told Eileen, I'm going to get a disc and I'm going to have him over. And I believe Adrian was there that night. Eileen was there. Julian was there. And we watched a story about the Alaska frontier. Alaska itself. And then I had some cruise liners up on the screen for him. And I told him, Julian, you can do this. You really can do this. You can enjoy this. And he was married at that time. And Julian decided he could do that. And lo and behold, Julian went on this Alaskan cruise. And when he got back, I asked him, how was it? And he said, that's the greatest thing he'd ever done travel-wise in his entire life. And he said he had the best time with his wife that you could imagine. Everything was perfect. And he really wanted to do more traveling. He talked to my nephew, Stephen countless times about heading to Israel. And probably it was my error in not having a disc on Israel and corralling him and getting him involved. And I really think I could have talked him into heading to Israel. It's one event that we just didn't do, unfortunately. But Julian lived a life just the way he wanted to. I can tell you, he didn't live any other way than the way he wanted. And Julian was an expert in everything, whether he was or not, it didn't matter. Julian was an expert. It didn't matter whether I was doing orthodontics. Julian would tell me what to do. He'd say, you got to do it this way. You have to do that. And you all know Julian, and Julian had a heart larger than me. He would do anything for anyone. And he just loved doing it. And he just had the greatest time helping people. He was just one of those people that just wanted to really, really help people. And I think we all will remember him as a true family person, loved his family, did everything he possibly could for his family and friends. So thank you very much for letting me say a few words about my marvelous brother.
It was a good bar mitzvah. Now I want to call upon Julian's nephew, Steve Widow.
First of all, I'm going to try only to speak in English because I have 9 children that have all stayed with Julian. And all of my children wanted to come, and unfortunately I didn't make it in time. So I'm first of all going to explain the idea of giving a eulogy. And actually, in the time of the Gomorrah, they would pay people to bring people to cry. And actually, I know, first of all, I want to say that David, I forgot to give you a fountain pen for your bar mitzvah. Okay, so really the purpose of a eulogy is to expound upon the unique points of the person that passed away. So I thought about what would I speak about, because Julian is such a special person. And I don't want anybody to feel bad, but there's only one person in the world that I would fly from Israel to come to for his funeral. David, don't feel bad, because like Grandma always used to say, you're going to live to 120 and we're going to be. So I decided I'm going to speak about Julian's father, because I don't think very many people know about Julian's father. So I did some research about Julian's father. So I'm going to explain to my family in Israel and to everybody here the history of our family. So one of the unique things, and the only thing I'm absolutely positive about Julian's father, was he was a Levy, because Julian's last name was Levy. Now, so there are 12 tribes, and the purpose of the Levium were they sang in the Holy Temple, and they also were in charge of opening, closing the doors. So I don't know if Julian had a good voice, but I do know that there's another very important purpose of the tribe of the Levites. And this is the first point that I want to expound upon about my uncle. And this came from his father, who his Hebrew name was Yitzchak Chana Levy, and there's no question he was a Levi. So when a person, it says in the Torah, made a mistake and accidentally killed somebody, or purposely killed somebody, the relatives of the person that was killed have a right to kill this murderer. And so therefore the Torah wants to protect him until he gets a proper judgment. So there's such a thing as a city of refuge. So in the Torah, when a person purposely or accidentally kills someone, let's say a person was driving in a car accident, got in a car accident, killed somebody. So the first thing he has to do is run to the city of refuge, because the relatives of this person that died have a right to kill the person, because maybe he did it on purpose. And the Torah didn't want that to happen. So the Torah sent this person to the city of the Levites. So my grandmother, Ida, was married to a Levi. And she became, when she was married to my uncle's father, a city of refuge. And the first point that I want to speak about my uncle, everybody that knew my uncle would think of him as a place that if they had a problem, they needed help, they would go to Julian. I spent at least 6 months living with Julian, at least it's more than one point of time. Adrian, Julian's daughter, told me that if she had an argument with her father, she went to her to Grandma Ida. So the first point that I want to expound upon, because we need to take with us when we leave this room something that we can remember Julian. And so the first point I want to take is Julian's father was a Levi. Julian was a Levi. He was a Levy. And the purpose of the Levium in the Torah, they had special cities. They didn't get let's say a point. They divided up Israel into 12 different areas, and everybody had land. The Levies didn't get any land, neither did the Kohanes. They got ritual tithes, and they didn't have to work. They were paid to do their service in the Holy Temple. And the Levites, the special thing that the Levites had, they had these cities. They didn't own the land, but they had these cities. And when a murderer ran away from the people that had the right to kill him, why did they go to the Levites? Because the Levites had a special good character traits. There's a great rabbi that lived in Denver, the Yehuda Ginsburg. So Yehuda Ginsburg explains that the Levites had an essential good qualities. So a person that even murdered by mistake, he had to go live in the city with the Levites. So these good character traits would wear off on him, and then they would have a judgment. And if it was a completely accident, then he would go free. And if he did it on purpose, then he would get the punishment of a person that murders on purpose. And if it was close to be accidental, so they would have to live with the Levites until the high priest died. So the first thing we see about Julian's father and my grandmother Ida, her first marriage was to Irving Levy, and my grandmother became a city of refuge because my grandmother was married to Mr. Levy, Irving Levy. So then my grandmother married a second time, and my mother and David are from the second marriage. Now, I want to tell everybody a little bit about the family, just so my children also know. Grandma Ida came to America in 1903. And just so everybody should know, they were a very, very religious family. My Julian used to love to speak Jewish. He spoke Yiddish. My mother spoke perfect Yiddish. And one of the things that we remember growing up was my mother always would ask the 4 questions in Yiddish. And Julian and Adrian, his daughter, and my grandmother on my other side would come to our house quite often on Friday night, because one of the things that my mother's grandmother, when she died, Grandma Rose, she made my mother swear that she would always light Shabbos candles. So growing up every Friday night, we didn't really know all the laws of Shabbos, but we kept my mother, even when we went to Mexico, my mother would bring Shabbos candles in the suitcase, and we would make Kiddush on Manischewitz wine. And Julian would come quite often, and my grandma on my father's side would come because they didn't have siblings. I mean, they didn't have wives, because Julian lived alone, and my grandmother, my father's father passed away very early, and we had a Friday night dinner. And that was something, and my mother used to talk about Thursday evening, they would bring the fish, the carp, they'd fill up the bathtub with water, and they would kill the fish and make fresh gefilte fish on Friday. Maybe David remembers. And they were, and another thing, just so my children, everybody here will know who our roots are, that my great grandfather, Aaron, who my brother's named after, came to America with boxes and boxes of Jewish books. Now, when I became religious 41 years ago, the only book that I recognized was a Chumash, the Torah, the written Torah. So, but there were boxes and boxes of Talmud, Gemorahs, and all kinds of books that great grandpa Aaron brought with him from Russia. So it's obvious that he was a learned man because he brought these books, these boxes of books. I remember them in the garage. So unfortunately, America, they didn't have in further west of New York, there was almost no Jewish education. And one thing that's important to know that many Jews, when they came across the ocean, they cut off their payas, they took off their yarmulkes, and they became non-religious. That's not true with great grandpa Aaron and my grandma Ida. They didn't have a religious education, but there were certain things that were so strong. My grandmother would always say, she would always give a person a blessing. And she would always say, you should live to 120. And another thing she would always say is, if you can't say something good, don't talk. Don't say anything. And she would tell me constantly, you have to say, your father and your mother have to remember the 5th, 6th commandment. Never say anything bad about your father and mother. And these are the things that she grew up from her family. And they came, and they didn't have a religious education. I know that Adrian said she didn't go to Hebrew school. And Julian, he worked from a very young age. That's the first point I want to bring out, is that from Julian took from his father and my grandmother, they were literally a city of refuge. And I think that all the family members understand what I'm talking about. Now, the second point I wanted to speak about was the tremendous, Julian had a big heart, bigger than David. And I'm telling you that Julian had a heart that he could only do good to other people. And it didn't matter. And this he got from his mother, because I remember when I was a little kid, okay, they didn't ask me to do the floor. But when I was 8 years old, I used to do the cash register in the store. And I remember that grandma used to taught me how to make change. And it was really cute. It was really neat because, you push the things, and it printed the amount on the paper, and then you had to make the change. So once in a while, a person would come in and grandma would tell me, he doesn't have any money. Don't ask him for any money. These were not, the necessarily the most religious people. This is, I don't know. In those days, there were Mexicans over there. But, and she had this attribute of kindness. It was an innate attribute of kindness. And my uncle on my father's side would come to Denver and collect money for his yeshiva. I think probably the biggest check he got was from Grandma Ida. And Grandma Ida, my brother told me that when he went to yeshiva, Grandma sent him a check every month. And it's a tremendous merit for my grandma. Every Jewish book that my brother bought, he bought with the money that my grandma used to send him $40 every month. This was 40 years ago. And he didn't go out to dinner. He bought Jewish books. And every Jewish book that my brother owns in that period of time came from the checks that grandma sent him every week. And grandma instilled this character trait of kindness, of worrying about other people, about thinking about other people first. I just want to mention another thing. Julian, we're taught that we should run away from honor. So I don't know if there's another person I knew that ran away from honor more than Julian. He was funny, and he was like the least, and he behind the scenes, he did so many things, and he helped so many people in so many different ways. And this is something we need to learn from Julian. We need to take with us from today this idea of a city of refuge and this idea of doing kindness to other people. Now, the third thing I want to mention is a deep concept, and I'll try to explain it in an easy way to understand, but Julian also was an epitome of this. Let's say you have a child, and the child is rebelling against you. So let's say that one of the things that a very great rabbi told me when I was raising my children was, your child's best friend has to be the father. And the minute your child, whether he's a boy or a girl, and he's no longer his best friend is his father or his mother, and usually should know that women are usually the strict people in the house, and the father is usually the easygoing person. That's the way Hashem, God made people. So generally speaking, that's the way it is. So the father has to be the kind benefits, and he always has to keep this relationship with his children, that if a child has a problem and he's going to do drugs, so he has to come to his father, so his father will give him money to buy drugs. This is the way the Torah looks at the relationship between a father and a child. God forbid he should leave the house and look for other places to get money. So this idea that now God, so to speak, is so great that he allows a person to, I'm going to explain what savlanut means. So the first word I learned when I came to Israel was savlanut. Savlanut, does anybody know what savlanut means? Savlanut, okay, so we're not, okay, so savlanut means patience. Now patience, I'll never forget, I came to my uncle's house and his daughter said, you know, the first thing you have to learn in Israel is patience. So what is patience? Savlanut. Remember this word, okay? You go to Israel, savlanut. So what does savlanut mean? It means you put your elbows like this and you push as hard as you can. So that's the way the Israeli people understand patience. But patience means that you have a load on your back and you're carrying other people's problems and you're not showing any remorse, any difficulties. And God, so to speak, allows his children to go astray, and he gives them the ability to go astray because he knows in the end they'll come back. So Julian had this unbelievable amount of patience. And I want everybody to know that my mother was the same way. My mother had this tremendous patience. She could put up with difficult people and she could live with the most difficult situations. And Julian was the same way. He never complained. I never heard Julian. I used to call Julian every other day. And when he got sick, and I never heard him complain. He said I had a difficult day, but to really complain, that he should share his suffering with somebody else, I never heard him do it. My mother was the same way. So this is a great attribute, to have patience. And to have the patience that Julian had is a unique quality that I know very few people. So as I finish this little eulogy, it's very important that each person in this room that can remember Julian should decide today to do an act of kindness, or they should, a family argument, they should decide to just forget all arguments and make peace with everybody, or they should try and be a city of refuge. These three qualities, each time, once a day, once a month, at least today, you should try and do something in Julian's merit. Now, Julian, one thing I have to ask forgiveness for myself, for my family, and because my family, everybody knew Julian and everybody loved Julian and everybody wanted to come and see him, and it just didn't happen. So I want to ask Julian for forgiveness in my name and in the name of everybody here. I know Julian is not the kind of person that will hold a grudge against anybody, but it's proper to ask forgiveness. And the other thing I want to say is that now my mother is in the next world, and my mother is waiting for Julian. And so is my father, because now my father sees the truth. And Julian is going to go to heaven. His soul is going to start to elevate. And Julian should say good things about everybody here. And that we can help Julian by doing kindness to other people, forgiving other people, to having patience for other people, and for being a city of refuge. And as my uncle, Yitzchak Zelig ben Yitzchak Chona, his soul will start, when they put the first shovel of dirt, it will start to go to the next world. And we can help Julian in his journey to eternity, because every Jew is full of reward like the seeds of a pomegranate. And my uncle did so much loving kindness and helped so many people that every single thing he did, he will have an eternal reward. And you cannot imagine how much that reward is going to be. And like David said, like Adrian said, nobody had anything bad to say about Julian. because he was a macher, like Uncle David said, he knew how to play both weddings and dance at everybody's wedding. And he knew how to, but he always had the idea of helping other people. And he always was a city of refuge, and he always had kindness, and he carried on his back so many burdens without showing a single grimace. So these qualities, if we can take a little bit of that further in our life, and we can do a kindness for somebody and say, I'm doing this for Julian Levy, and that will help, that will be a merit for Julian. And Julian, he should be a Melitz Tov, Ad Shebil Mavetz Nenetzach. And I pray that we will all be together soon. We've suffered enough, the Jewish people. It's time for the Holy Messiah to come soon. And we should all be together. We'll be together with Julian and Grandma Ida and my father and mother, and everybody will be friendly and everybody will be happy because we're all really one big family. Every Jew is a unique individual and we are all one family. And like David said, Julian was the biggest family man in the world, and we're all one big family. And it's my prayer that we should think about Julian and we should try and emulate Julian.
There's no piece of literature that's used more often in moments like this than the words of the 23rd Psalm. And I suppose that the reason is it says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I learned a long time ago from rabbinical school that when King David, who was supposedly the author of the book of Psalms, wrote this, he had something in mind that we don't think about too often. And what he had in mind was, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, means can't get stuck in the middle of the valley. You got to go through it. You got to walk through it. You have to see the other end. And I'm going to read it in Hebrew. And those of you who know some of the English, please say it with me when we're done. Adonai roi lo echsor bino teshe yar bitzeni al mei menuchot yinahaleni. Nafshi yishovev yancheni b'magleit tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit samavet. Lo irara ki ata imadi, shivtecha mishantecha hema yenachamuni. Ta'aroch lefanai shulchan neged sorarai, tishanta v'shem en roshi kosi ravaya. Ach tov v'chesed yirdafuni kol yemei chayai, v'shavti b'veit Adonai, la'orech yamim. For the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures, he leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He guideth me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of God forever. I'd like now, and I hope this will work for the three of you, I'm going to call upon three of the grandchildren to come up together, Alyssa and Andrew and Eric, to share their thoughts.
Jim, I need another stool. I'm short. Do you have one? No, I really need another one. Like, I'm really short. I don't think anybody can see me because I can barely see anybody. Okay, cool. I feel super short. Julian Stanley Levy was a man of his time and a man ahead of his time. A rapper has a quote that goes like this: when I leave, I told you I'm short.
No, it's not, has nothing, has to do with where this is. You got to speak into the microphone.
I'm trying. A rapper has a quote that goes like this: when I leave a room, it's gonna be footprints of funk wherever I step, because I'm a soul funk crusader. Now, before anybody gets offended, I want you to pause and think about the man that we are here for today. Old Fart did have a funk to him. Whether it was the last meal he ate because it was all over his shirt, or it was the aftershave that he had used since he had first started shaving. Or maybe it was the fresh cut coat of paint that covered his pants, so much so you had to stop and wonder if he even got the wall. If it wasn't one of those, it had to be his hands that were coated in dirt, oil, solution, or anything else he might have worked on that day. Even recently, he smelled like a dog because he allowed me to create a kennel in his house, a kennel that he proudly called Levy's Kennel. Yes, my grandfather had a physical, smelly funk that was so distinct, I will forever be able to recall it, because just like it will be ingrained into my soul. However, I did some research, and it turns out the rapper was not talking about a smelly funk, but instead it was a mindset of a personality. And Lord knows, my grandfather had a personality. Let the Lord lead us and the county feed us was his motto when it came to religion of any kind. Sure, he was raised Jewish, and he is being buried as a Jew. And he saw the importance of our culture, while also embracing and finding himself. But as we all know, Papa was a stubborn old man. As a teenager, my grandfather took pride in his ability to cause trouble and rebel in every which way possible, even when it ended up with him being arrested for electrocuting a police officer. And even when he grew and he had to find his own way at his own time, Mom, that sounds really familiar. I think I got it from him. He became more responsible in his adulthood, but that doesn't mean he learned his lesson. Old Fart loved to share stories about Vegas with the group and with others as well. He talked about the Broncos and going to the games or betting on the horses. Then he became a grandpa, and boy, was he good at that. The story goes like this. On March 30th, 1994, Julian Stanley Levy walked into the hospital room in Colorado Springs, where he met his granddaughter. It took one touch, and they were immediately the best of friends. Fate sealed itself, and we became a pair. Papa was the friend that was able to get me out of anything. Grounded? Okay, I'll go to work to Papa. It took my mom way too long to realize how much I loved going to work with him, and her punishment was my favorite thing. There was nothing that my mom could do. I had a Papa as my best friend and my favorite person. As he got more grandchildren, he really thrived and loved his version of himself because he was able to learn how to be and create something special for all of us. Eric, Saul, and I each have our distinct memories, lessons, experiences, and relationships with Papa. He was able to create a lasting funk with each of us, and that was what made him the happiest. At the end of the day, we each have our own funk and our own sacred idea of Papa. Julian Stanley Levy, Saint Julian, Mr. Levy, Dad, Mr. Julian, God, Old Fart, and most importantly, Papa. Thank you for being etched into my soul and forever on my skin. You will always be my favorite person. I love you, Papa.
I guess I have to be the formal one. So I'd like to extend my unwavering gratitude to everyone who came here today to celebrate the life of a truly great man, Julian Levy. Julian, as we all know, was a man of tremendous personality. He was compassionate, outgoing, a little bit loud, and very vibrant. He had a sense of humor that was unbounded and on some very rare occasions, the inclinations of a true smartass. He always found a reason to smile and laugh with us, and through his example, he taught me how to find joy in the simplest of things. Though my time spent with Julian was short in comparison to many of you here, I feel that every moment spent with him was an enrichment to my life. And I am certain that same feeling of enrichment was experienced by everyone here today. Growing up, I always found myself asking the question, what is a grandfather? Since I was never lucky enough to know my own. That unanswered question always left a void in my heart until I was lucky enough to meet Julian, who graciously welcomed me into his home and, more importantly, into his family. One of the biggest honors that has ever been bestowed upon me was hearing him say that I am and forever will be one of his grandchildren now. That night at his kitchen table will be one of my most profound memories and something that I will cherish for the rest of my life. From the first time that I met Julian, he made me feel right at home. When he learned about the loss of my father, he took it upon himself to make sure I did not feel alone. Always had someone to come to for advice, a story, or just any plain old conversation. It didn't take long to start spending quality time, just him and I, talking about cars, fishing, business, and our personal favorite, blackjack betting strategies. As time went by, my relationship with Julian grew and our conversations became even more meaningful. His support and his advice gave me the courage to risk it all, quit my job, and start a business with my longest standing friend. It shouldn't be a surprise that he had not only experience in my newfound industry, but a cabinet of tools for me to take to, since he really did do it all. Without his knowledge and support, I would not be where I am today. So Julian, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Not only was his garage filled with triplicates of everything I would need for my new sign shop, but it was also filled with a beautiful Model a car that he made sure to tell me about on our first interaction. So when I decided to buy my Audi R8, it was the necessity that he was the first one to see it. The day I showed up, he cracked one of his crooked grins, got in the car, and was taken on a joyride. His smile was even more powerful than the V10 carrying us around the tech center as he waved to everyone, but yet he still had something to say. Andrew, that's one hell of a car, but tell me, what the hell is it good for? To beat everyone else to the next red light? But he did ask me to let him take it out when he found his next hot date. And Julian, I promise I would have let you take in that car anytime, but only because you can't get into too much trouble without a back seat. The actor Michael Landon once said, "Remember me with smiles and laughter, for that's how I'll remember you. If you can only remember me with tears and sorrow, then don't remember me at all." I firmly believe this quote is a tremendous reflection of Julian and how he made us all feel. He will be deeply missed, but the laughs and smiles that we shared will live on forever. Thank you.
I'm loud enough, so I'm not gonna need the
Yeah,
microphone.
you need the mic.
No, it'll be okay. I can project. You guys hear me? Great. Okay. Thank you all for coming here today to honor my grandfather, Julian, or as I knew him, Papa. Julian was truly an incredible person. One of the most authentic, honest, and trustworthy people you'd ever have the privilege to meet. All of us here are better because we knew him. I would not be where I am today if I didn't have my grandfather. I owe most of my opportunities to the support that he provided me my entire life. Monetary support, sure, but more importantly, emotional support. I didn't have a father in my life, and the father figures that I did have came and went. However, I always had my grandfather. He was the rock of my life, a compass that was there to set me straight, or rather straight as I could be set, and push me towards my next port. He never judged me for what I wanted to do or who I wanted to be. He just wanted me to be happy and succeed. He was a man who spent his life working for others, but never once seeking the recognition he rightfully deserved. Therefore, I feel that it is my duty to eulogize him in a manner that gives him the recognition he deserves. So, Papa, here is my attempt. Eulogizing this man is an insurmountable task, not because there aren't enough words or stories to share, but rather on the contrary. Do I keep it all light and happy and tell stories about how he was just a kid at heart? Or do I make it solemn and lament over how deeply he will be missed? Do I focus on memories of him working at the laundromats or memories of when he reluctantly accepted retirement? I mean, truly, this is someone who lived a long, long, long life. Get it? Because he was old? It's okay. You can laugh. Humor in the face of seriousness is a lesson we have all learned from Julian. It's one of his many lessons or legacies he leaves behind. I've been thinking a lot about that word, legacy. It's such an odd concept. The idea that our actions and lives can create something intangible that will outlive us all is a wild concept. It's as close to immortality as we can get. So I've been asking myself what his legacies were. The importance of education is the first to come to mind. An ironic legacy, considering this was a man who didn't graduate high school, but a legacy nonetheless. I mean, he sent siblings, children, and grandchildren all through various stages of schooling. And from the time I was first in school, it was a necessity to go report my grades to Papa. I would get rewarded for every A or B and reprimanded for anything less. But regardless of the grades, I was always treated to a classic lecture about the importance of school and the importance of learning. But also that you can't learn everything from a book and that opportunities to learn can show up unexpectedly. What about the appreciation of art as a legacy? He loved art. The way his face lit up when he saw a beautiful painting, or the way you could see how music moved him, was something that I will always carry with me. I'll never forget when I told him about wanting to pursue a BFA in stage management, a degree that was constantly looked down upon by others, but yet he didn't bat an eye. If that's what you wanted to do, was all he said. And when I confirmed with him that that was what I wanted to do, the conversation ended and was never questioned again. He didn't try to convince me to pursue a more useful degree, and he was always there to support me. And he watched countless shows, some good and some bad, but always watched with exuberant pride and appreciation. Sounds like a good legacy to me, but it doesn't fully encompass him, does it? That's a rhetorical question, as I just needed a good segue. Once again, it's really okay to laugh. So, how about that as a legacy? Not being afraid to crack a joke. Told you, really just needed that good segue. I mean, this was Julian S. Levy, the biggest wise ass of them all. When I was in elementary school, I knew the only proper response to being called a smart ass was, well, it's better than being a dumb one. Name a fifth grader with a better response than that. That was one of his first lessons he gave me. Use your wit, make a joke. My cattiness was perfected because of him. What can I say? I was always destined to be a bitch. Laughter heals, and we could all use a little healing right now. So give yourself permission to laugh. It wouldn't be Julian's eulogy if I didn't talk about his legacy of hard work. I mean, this was a man who came from nothing, worked hard to create a fantastic life for himself and eventually for his family. He knew and taught on to others that work pays off. This is not a world where things are given freely, but rather a world where you have to know what you want, take the steps you need to get it, find a goal, and work towards it. The last legacy I'll touch on is a deeply personal one to me. His ability to accept the ones he loves. I am gay, an obvious statement I know, but not an easy statement to say. I've been rejected numerous of times by people who were supposed to be there for me because of that statement. However, one person who never did was my grandfather. I came out to my grandfather about 2 years ago, and that conversation could have easily gone south. Instead, it went like this. Papa, I'm gay. Okay. Are you safe? Yes. Are you happy? Yes. End of conversation. That is the type of man we are here to mourn today. A type of man who is willing to put down all societal expectations, accept new thoughts and beliefs, and let his love grow in adversity and not crumble. Admittedly, though, he was upset, as his joke of asking me if I found a broad to marry yet no longer applied, and gentleman to marry yet just didn't have the same ring to it. Papa might not have been the most eloquent, and God knows he was not the most polite, but he was kind and expressed his love through dirty jokes, smart-ass comments, and brutal honesty. Live like Julian. Learn as much as you can. Appreciate the beauty of art. Laugh and love endlessly. Papa, I love you. I'll miss you. And thank you. I'm also now going to just read some words that my mom and my aunt wanted to say. On behalf of my sister and I want to thank you all for being here today. My father was an extraordinary man, and it was an honor to be his daughter. Next, I'm going to ask for a bit of grace as I say these words. Dad, thank you for giving me a second chance of life with you. I'll never forget the first time I met you. You were at Skate City for my 12th birthday party, and you gave me a Madame Alexander doll from Israel, looked me in the eye, and said, you are going on IST. I'll explain later. That will always be how I see you, as the man who came into my life and immediately made it better. You made me better, and I will miss you so much. It was a privilege and an honor to take care of you these last couple of years. Thank you for everything. I love you.
I do need a microphone. I know, dear friends, that you've been seated for a long time. And one thing I have to tell you, I learned a long time ago when I was in rabbinical school that moments like this are, yes, they're terribly important, especially for families, but they are also supposed to be 45 minutes or less. That's what I was told. That's what I was taught. So forgive me for just a couple. I promise you, I've been in this community for 52 years. When Eric said that he was also known as Saint Julian, I will tell you right now, that was the name I gave him because of his savlanut. We used to travel together a little bit, and there was no secret that he and Adrian, not this Adrian, that may have been too, because he was your dad, but the other Adrian, they didn't always operate without fighting. And so I remember once we were in Vegas, as it turns out, and I pulled him aside and I said, Julian, I have only one name for you. It's not Papa, it's not Dad, it's not Julian, it's Saint Julian, because he had so much patience. I love Julian in so many, many ways. And Rabbi, I do agree with you that our purpose in being here today is not to go over his biography. This is not about biography. This is about values. This is about who he was as an individual. And the older I get and the longer I've been here, I know that our purpose in joining together to pay respects is to make sure that we understand not what he did, but to understand who he was. And I have to say that the words that have already been shared tell us a lot about who Julian was. And I just want to add, I promise you, just a couple more Not, I want to talk about this and I just want to share a couple of thoughts with you about who I think Julian was, at least from my perspective. I know that often when people are in this process of dying, and I saw him a couple of weeks ago, and he was he knew he was in the process of dying, even though he didn't want to admit it, because he took me and showed me the car that he's ready to drive again. So he's sort of a futurist in that regard, but he knew he was in the process of dying. Grief can be a teacher for us. And I do believe that the following is absolutely true. When people like Julia are in this process, they want three things to be left to family. First, they want family to understand what they lived for, what was most important in their lives. Secondly, they want to know that they made a difference. And that's so terribly important, not just for Julian, but for all of us. That's what we're here for. We're here to become better human beings today because of a life that has been, he was not perfect. Trust me, I know that. He was not perfect, but he was a good guy. And he left this world a better place because he was a part of it. And he left his family better. Yes, there's unfinished business, and he knew it, I knew it, family knows it, and maybe one day soon that business can be finished. And this family, for all these generations, can move forward as they really ought to, because that's really ultimately what he would have wanted. And if that happens, he will have continued to make a difference. And I believe that with all my heart and soul. And lastly, when people are in this process of dying, they want to know that they'll be remembered. Us being here today will mean that he will be remembered for who he was. One of the things that really has played an important role in his life, and we didn't mention it yet, he was a first-generation American Jew. What does that mean? It's very simple. Parents and grandparents came from Eastern Europe. My grandparents came here in 1906. Okay, same. And they also came from Ukraine, which is what we have to think about ourselves. They came here in 1906. So his family came here in 1903. Same generation. And why did they leave Eastern Europe? They didn't leave Eastern Europe because the streets were paved with gold. That is not why they came here. They came here because of anti-Semitism. They came here to find freedom. They came here to find safety. And that was their primary role. And when they left Eastern Europe, where was the last place they visited? They visited the cemeteries to say goodbye to that 1,000 years of history that we had in Eastern Europe. And they visited to say goodbye to those generations. And they came here and they bequeathed to their children the responsibility of securing the freedom that they came here to find. And sometimes that was financial. Very often it was financial, but it wasn't just financial. It was emotional security. It was physical security. It was the future. And that's what they came here to preserve. And that's what his generation was responsible for. And what did he bequeath to the next generation? Continuity. It's no mistake that you're a chassid. It's no mistake that we're here in a Jewish mortuary. It's no mistake that regardless of what we as individuals do and say, no matter how it is that we pray as Jews because of people like Julian, who said to the next generation, continuity is important. And so, dear friends, on this day, when we remember all of these things about him, remember how non-judgmental he was and how important that is for the next generation. We're here to say we're sorry for you as family who have lost a stabilizing force in your lives, and that we hope and we pray that his purpose in life will make your lives more secure, will make your lives better in days to come. and will make each of you find the strength and the courage to do as he did in life, to emulate who he was. Perhaps these words from the poet will be helpful at this time. The poet wrote, "When I die, if you need to weep, cry for someone walking the street beside you. And when you need me, put your arms around others and give them what you need to give me. You can love me most by sharing your joys and multiplying your good deeds. You can love me most by letting me live in your eyes and not in your mind. And when you say cottage for me, remember what our tradition teaches. Love doesn't die. People do. So when all that's left of me is love, give me away. Adonai Natan v'Adonai Lakach. Yehi Shem Adonai Mevarach Mi'atav Yad Olam. God has given. God has taken away. Praise be the name of God, now and forevermore. And let us all say together, Amen. And now, dear friends, family, I would ask you, as you're able to, please rise for the traditional memorial prayer. And I would ask Stephen to come forward for El Mole. When you're done, I'll do the English. Okay, yeah, but it's not a full one. What? It's not a full one. You have to, do you have a full one? No, I don't. Yeah. Maybe it's missing. You can add in between.
Eo Male Rachamim. I'll translate as I go. Is that okay?
Translate,
Okay.
translate.
Eo Male Rachamim. Shochein b'mromim. Hamse menucha nechonu tachas kanfi ashchina. Im kadoshim tohorim b'zohar rakia mazhirim. Es nishmas Yisachar Zelig ben Yitzchak Chana. Shahalach la'olamo. Bala rachamim yastirehu b'seiser kanafav la'olamim. V'yitzror b'tzror achayim. Es nishmaso Adonai hu nachlaso. V'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo v'nomar. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. O God, full of compassion, eternal spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence unto Julian Levy, who has entered into eternity. O God of mercy, let him find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of eternal life. Be thou his possession, and may his repose ever be peace. And let us all say together, Amen. You may be seated. You're going to do Shiva? All right, I do. Okay. So before Jim takes over, family wants you to know that they will be at home immediately following burial, tomorrow, Thursday, and Friday. Today they'll be there till 8 o'clock. Tomorrow from 12 to 2 to 8. Oh, 2 to 8. And that's the same on Wednesday and Thursday. And Friday it is 12 to 4. And that will be at Julian's home.
Ladies and gentlemen, that does conclude our service here at the funeral home. We'll have burial at Emmanuel Cemetery, which is within Fairmount. We do not have an escorted procession to the cemetery, but you are all welcome and invited to join us at the cemetery for interment. So we need to ask you to make your way to the cemetery on your own. In the handouts were directions to the cemetery from our funeral home. The address is also on there if you want to put it into a GPS. If you end up following the hearse and the SUVs, the family's cars, I still need you to remember, since we're not in procession, you must obey all traffic laws. You can follow us, but you have to obey all traffic laws, just like we will. If you're not going to the cemetery, we'll ask you to just maybe give way to those who are. And if you are going to the cemetery, don't waste too much time here or spend too much time here. And with conversation, please get to your cars so we can get to the cemetery as quickly as possible. One last request is, if I'll ask you not to come forward, please refrain from trying to speak with the family. It will delay their process and get into the cemetery. Thank you for your attendance.
So I have 30 seconds.